Hi, I'm Nancy Laffey from Completely Quilted, and this month we are working on our pieced border. So I have some of my segments already created. These will not be any new elements, so we're going to have those same wide dimensional triangle units that we've been making before. We're also going to have triangles that have been glued on. But we're going to be piecing these different colored sections. So there's actually 3 sections and a corner block. And then we're going to piece these rectangles together and then sew these segments together to create small segments instead of long borders. It's going to make it so much easier to sew everything together. So for creating our borders, we're going to have a lot of folded rectangles and squares that are going to be sandwiched together and sewn to create all of these dimensional triangles for each segment. So it's really important that you are just cutting your pieces accurately, counting them, and making sure that you're sewing the right colors together to create all of these different colored triangles for the fins and tails, which are going to be our border segments for all the way around the outside of our Atlantis quilt. So it's a lot more piecing than we've done in the past, but it's going to go together pretty fast, and these aren't new techniques. There are a couple tips that I want to give you for the curves that you're going to create. You can see here I've already sewn this one. You'll always make sure that you press these seams open in the back, and when I go to sew my segments together also, I'm going to make sure that all of my segments are pieced and pressed open as well. So this is one of my units here. I have this unit here. And then I have some of these already ready to go to be pieced together. So after I have all of these elements sewn, I'll have my last few pieces finished up, and then I'll be ready to make my corner blocks so that I can sew these segments together and show you how our quilt will be finished. So I went ahead and pieced my corner blocks together, so only 4 of them. And what's unique about the borders in the corners is some of these curves you go ahead and top stitch before you sew your corners or borders together. So this corner is going to be top stitched, and then it'll be sewn on to my quilt in separate units. So I have all of my elements created, my different pieces, and this is going to be the segment that gets sewn together. There's 28 of these border units, and so after you've got your different units pieced, then you're going to sew these segments together. These finished segments are going to be the ones that we're going to add the curves to before we sew our segments onto our blocks. And I'll just show you how that works out too. So here are my border strips, my border sections. They are all sewn together, and this is kind of what it looks like before you do your top stitching. And then after you do your top stitching on your fins and tails, it looks like this. Now what you do not top stitch is you do not top stitch any of your sea blue background. So there's just these 2 sections on either side here. You're not going to top stitch those until they're sewn on. So I will go ahead and continue curving all my strips, and then I'll be ready to start sewing these to my blocks. So I'm ready to start sewing all of my blocks together. Unlike some traditional quilts, I'm not just going to sew my blocks together into rows and then sew my borders on. I'm sewing my borders on to my blocks in sections. So this is the top left corner of my quilt. And what I will do is I will start by sewing on a side strip piece first. And then I will sew my corner on to this piece. And then I will sew this. So that will be my corner. And then each block in the row so this is the next block, is going to have a side, a border piece section sewn onto it, and then this will be sewn side by side. And I'm going to just continue on sewing in those sections so that my borders will fit really nicely. When you're sewing your border segments to your block, you may find that some of your segments are just a little bit too long. So there's not going to be any cutting here. You're going to do pinning and easing. So you can see here that my border section is almost a 1/2 inch too long, but that's okay. So I'm going to start by pinning and making this one corner even first, and then I will pin my other corner, and you can start to see all of the fullness between those 2 points. So what you're going to do is you're just going to disperse that fullness between the entire edge. So I'll pin another in the center, and then I'll come over and pin in between each one. And when you stitch this on your sewing machine, you want the fullest part. So for me, it's my border section that's the fullest. That's actually going to be on the bottom, so it's going to be the underneath side of my sewing machine, and that's going to help me make sure that those edges are going to meet up when I'm done sewing this section. So here's my same block and border section sewn together and pressed, and you can see that you cannot even tell that there was that original fullness in that border section. Thank you so much for watching my Atlantis Block of the Month final video demonstration on these really cool fin and tail borders. After you got all of your blocks sewn together and everything's done, then you can go back in and finish those last few curves that you have around the outside edge, these sea blue ones. And this is also where you can decide if you want to make it a little larger and add another border strip all the way around, or if you just want your binding, which is also that sea blue color, to be that final piece of your quilt. So I've had so much fun making this quilt. Thank you so much.